Hey everybody, Tim Anderson here, aka Renfell, and welcome to the latest video in my book review series with my stupid accent. I took a break from the Sword and Sorcery month. I was supposed to jump right into the second Conan novel by Robert Jordan, but the first one was a little much for me. I didn't really care for it, so I needed a palate cleanser before I jumped into the Second one. I can't talk this morning. I probably need more coffee. Um, I originally was not going to read this book until December because I was going to wait until I finished it November Sword and Sorcery months. I really can't talk this morning. This is funny. Um, but after that first Robert Jordan Conan book, I said, nah, I'm not going to wait. So today's update is all about Heir to the Empire by Timothy Zahn. I think it's Zahn. It might be Zahn. I would never know how to pronounce his last name, and I don't actually pay attention. So who knows? I remember the first time I read this book. I still remember when and where I got this book. This is probably one of, I gotta say, it's up there in the first like top 3 or 5 books that I can remember when I was a early, in my preteen years, when I was really getting into reading. This was one of those books. And we went to Walmart and we were going to grocery shopping, and it was in Marshfield, Missouri, where I was growing up. We moved there when I was 9. This book came out when I was 11, and I'll never forget walking into Walmart, and they had a stand, one of those cardboard stands, those like pyramid stands, set up at the entrance to Walmart. This is when Walmart used to have actually a pretty big book section. I don't really think they do anymore. But back in the day, they used to have a pretty significant book section. And walked in, and there was the paperback, $5, $6, whatever it was, and it had the picture of, the classic first edition drawing with Joris Kaboth with his hands out like this. Kaboth, whatever. My pronunciation is horrible, so bear with me. But he's standing there with his hands like this, and lightning's coming at his fingertips. And you've got all the main characters on the cover. You've got Han, Luke, Leia, Chewie, all those characters. You've got Starfighters. It evokes everything classic Star Wars. And you have to remember, this was 10 years almost before the prequels, well, 8 years or so. But this was almost a full decade before the prequels. This was before George Lucas had done the revamped editions, the ones that added the digital enhancements to the original trilogy, which I think they called the THX editions, which came out in like 96, 97, somewhere there. Um, so this was, in a time of sort of empty space where there hadn't been anything, because this is before the Clone Wars. This is before anything. This is the novel that launched the entire expanded universe for Star Wars, which I think these days is called Legacy or something like that. I'm always going to refer to it as the extended universe because I love it. I think it's canon, even if Disney doesn't recognize it as canon. What's very interesting is some aspects of these books have made it into official Star Wars canon. We'll talk about that in a minute. Um, I had great memories of this book, and I hadn't read it since probably the, you know, mid 90s. Um, so I knew that I wanted to reread it, and I know um, they've been cranking out Thrawn novels the last few years. We've got Thrawn in some of the upcoming shows. We had Thrawn in Star Wars Rebels. So that's what's really interesting about this is these books, even though parts of them are not considered canon, parts of them are. Grand Admiral Thrawn as a character was created in this series of books. This character has now spawned own series of novels, which I have actually not read, which I need to. This character showed up, as I said, in Star Wars Rebels. He's now an official character. He was mentioned in the most recent season of The Mandalorian. We anticipate not we anticipate, we've confirmed. It is confirmed that this character will be showing up in season 3 of The Mandalorian, and I would assume it's going to be showing up in the Ahsoka series as well. So this book is the start of a trilogy that not only created a bunch of characters that we know and love that have gone on to become canon, but also locations. And like Coruscant. Coruscant did not officially exist as the capital planet until Timothy Zahn invented this planet. So it's just tons of cool stuff in this book. For those of you who are Star Wars nerds like I am, this was the book that launched, as I mentioned, the entire Star Wars expanded universe. And there, especially in like the first 7, 8 years, so many good books came out. There was the X-Wing series by Michael Stackpole. Yub yub, Commander. There was the Jedi Academy series by Kevin J. Anderson. They were pulling in authors from science fiction and fantasy universes and just giving them money to just crank out amazing standalone books as well as duologies and trilogies and beyond. And it was a golden time for Star Wars. This book in particular, though, I remember being, 11 years old, going into Walmart, seeing it, and being like, "Mom, Mom, Mom, please, can I buy this?" And being allowed to spend my allowance money on it. And um, went home and voraciously devoured this book in like a couple days probably. I have no recollection of how quickly I read it, but I do know I read it multiple times. And then I was like, when's the second one coming out? When's the third one coming out? And this trilogy for me established in my mind that Star Wars was now so much more than the movies that I had grown up loving as a child, and was now something tangible that I could jump into and live. And now I could actually experience further adventures of my favorite characters, because this book is all about the classic characters. You've got Han, Chewie, Lando, Leia, Luke, R2, 3PO. And this is post Return of the Jedi. Only I don't actually know exactly what the timeline is, but it's within a few years or less after the fall of the Empire and the Return of the Jedi ending. Um, Book starts out, Leia is pregnant with twins, and there's stuff going on there. Luke is training Leia to become a Jedi, which, by the way, is something that has carried on into canon, as we've seen in the most recent Disney era Star Wars movies in the Skywalker saga, where Leia was trained by Luke. This is where that first came into play. Um, Obviously, the twins did not make it into canon. Those, fell by the wayside somewhere. But we did see Ben Solo, coming out of that, so, it is what it is. Um, but we also have characters that were created specifically for this adventure. Obviously, the most famous of those being Grand Admiral Thrawn, who is now, like I said, a canon character. But for my money, we have one of the ultimate fan favorites, which I would assume at some point this character will become canon. Um, it has to, but the character of Mara Jade, um, which is a phenomenal character. I will say that even though I gave this a 5-star review on Goodreads, because it's such a good read. It's fast paced, it's easy to read. There's not a lot of, you know, crazy prose going on. It's just really quick, clean grammar, and it gets you through the adventure, and it's just fun. It's just a fun read, man. The only aspect of this book that I didn't like, but it wasn't enough to take away from me, is the character of Mara Jade, as cool as she is, has moments when her backstory is almost too generic. Almost. Because it is a story that's interesting, but when it finally is told, when she tells the backstory to Luke, it's done in such a way where it happens so quickly. It almost, to me, it feels like it cheapens that a little bit, because it's like, really? That's why? Like, that seems like a really petty reason to feel the way you feel. But apart from that, she's a really cool character that goes on to become a, pretty important component in further adventures. And of course, we get introduced to Talon Card, who, for my money, is one of the coolest smuggler characters of all time. He's like if Han Solo was also um, a strategist and someone who cared about, having a business enterprise. Like, he has that smuggler slash scoundrel mentality, but he also has a great sense of honor, and he's an entrepreneur and a very smart businessman and strategist who's always looking several moves ahead. So some amazing characters get introduced in this book series, which go on to dominate the rest of the series. Also, you have the Dark Jedi. Actually, he's not a Dark Jedi; he's just a Jedi, the clone of Joruus C'baoth. I always forget how to pronounce his name. Who is an interesting character, somewhat two-dimensional, um, because his motivations are fairly, again, going back to the Mara Jade thing. His motivations are somewhat generic. Um, but you can ignore it because he's still a pretty cool overall kind of background bad guy that we're putting out there to, for Luke to face. Um, I think that story wise, again, for me, this is, like I said, 5 stars. It's just a really fast paced read. And I vaguely remember where the second book goes. Oh, I haven't started reading it yet because I'm jumping into the next Conan novel. But this is a great setup for the overall trilogy because it doesn't have a cliffhanger ending, but it sort of has like a Empire Strikes Back type ending where it leaves you with a solid stopping point without having an actual conclusion to that first novel because it's very much, oh, this is like an interlude. We're pausing for a breath before we go into book two, as opposed to some other novels where the end of the first book is a definite end. This is not done so, but it's not a cliffhanger. I don't think, because you very much have a conclusion. It's just not a total conclusion. It's just like, oh, we're sort of putting a bookmark in it and get ready for the next section. If you haven't read this yet, highly recommend you do. It's not hard science fiction. This is Star Wars, and it's everything that's good about Star Wars. It's pulpy, juicy, quick reading, easy fun that preteens. I read it when I was 11. There's nothing in here that's, this is easily PG. Um, I don't even think there's not even really, I mean, there is some fight scenes, but even those fight scenes are not like, I don't think there's ever a mention of like blood or guts or anything like that. So this is something that anyone can read, from a basic level, and it's just good fun Star Wars. So that's my take. I will be obviously reading the next two interspaced between my Conan adventures. Hopefully you enjoy. Let me know what you think about the book if you've read it before. If you haven't, if you have questions, let me know in the comments below. It's great, fun, and again, this introduces you to the Star Wars expanded universe, which even though it's not considered canon these days, is I think it's well worth your time to dive into if you like Star Wars adventures. It's because it's kind of like looking at the Forgotten Realms or Dragonlance. There's a whole bunch of authors that have worked in this universe, and there's a lot of really cool stories that are told within the overall setting of Star Wars and that universe. And it doesn't always have to deal with the Jedi. A lot of it is just dealing with the overall world. Kind of like The Mandalorian is not about the Jedi. It's about the bounty hunter, this Mandalorian who there is something that ties into the Jedi, but that's also because the Jedi are a part of the world around them. So anyway, thanks for following along. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to get updates for future content. Don't forget to join the Discord below if you want to come hang out with us over there. And stick around for the next episode, which will be coming at some point. Until then, stay safe, everybody.